Hey y'all, it's Laura. Welcome back to another Cocoa Vanilla Studio video. This time we're using the brand new collection, Great Escape, and I have 3 lovely 3x4 photos and a little bits and pieces of this collection. Now this is the first layout that I'm making with this collection, so nothing's been cut into yet other than a few pattern papers for some embellishments. I fussy cut a whole bunch of little clouds, and we're going to be using them on this layout. Now I also cut up some stars and a few other icons. I think the feathers, yes, I did the feathers as well. I really like those. Those are really pretty, cute, easy to use for clustering. But I had these lovely cut file pieces left over from a previous layout, and I don't know exactly where these came from. I've had them in my stash for a really long time, just pre-cut. And I vaguely remember cutting them with my silhouette, which was years ago. So I'm not exactly sure where they came from. They're just a very simple, basic cloud outline, and I'm going to back them with this absolutely gorgeous striped paper. So these little clouds are going to be at the top of my layout. So I'm going to have one band across the top, which is the clouds, and that will hold my journaling and my title, and then my photos will be in a separate band across the bottom. So this is a bit of a shelf design, which is one of my go-tos. And so I've created 2 shelves, one with the clouds, one with the photos at the bottom. And those little manufacturing strips there to the right side are going to be what hold my photos as a shelf at the bottom. This is a really fun way to use manufacturing strips. I really enjoy this. They make a great little layer underneath of your photos, kind of just a placeholder for your photos to be. We're going to play a little bit with like asymmetrical lines on this one, but I think it's really fun. I think it turns out really cute. So off camera, I am going to go ahead and get the rest of these all ready to go, all glued down so that my background is started. I can kind of get placement idea for my photos. I want them to be slightly off kilter so that they're not a straight line across, just for a little bit more interest, a little bit more fun. And then I have my manufacturing strips here, which I'm going to cut in half. Now I went ahead and cut all of them in half, and then I'm going to tuck them underneath of my photos in such a way that they look like they're stretching all the way across. Now Cocoa Vanilla Studios manufacturing strips, the little kind of sample color piece or patterned piece that you get inside of them is not a full 12 by 12. It is probably about 9 inches long, give or take. And so cutting it in half allowed me to have a little bit more flexibility of tucking it behind my photos to make it look like it'll stretch all the way over that 12 inches at the bottom, but doesn't quite. Now I did go ahead and cut up strips from one of the A5 pieces of paper, and I'm going to use that to mat my photos. So cutting them in strips like this allows me to stretch that piece of paper to mat all 3 of these 3x4 photos, whereas if I didn't do this, I would have a little bit more difficulty matting all 3 of these photos with that one piece of paper. Could I do it? Probably, but it would be one of those patchwork with scraps situations, and those tend to be a bit messy and fussy, and this is just a little bit more organized, a little bit more layered instead, and I really like the way that this works out for me. And so I just go around, add a little strip of tape behind each border of the photos, just like that, and then stick it down onto my paper. Line it up and trim it off. It's super easy, it's super quick, and it is a great way to stretch your paper just a little bit further. It's especially true if you happen to have just one 6x8 pad or A5 pad in your collection and you want to use it to mat your photos without using 2 pieces of paper to mat 3 photos. You can use this strip idea to stretch that paper just a little bit further. Now I'm going to go ahead and set up these little strips behind my photos. I'm just giving you a quick idea of how this is roughly going to look before I go off camera to kind of tape and glue all of this down. And this is just a very fiddly process, which is why I typically cut it out of my videos, because it's literally just picking up each photo, turning each little layer behind it, tape, glue, turn it back over, It takes a little bit of time, but I think that the overall effect that it gives to the layout is worth it. So even though this is a very detailed and kind of fiddly layout, I think it turns out really fun in the end. So as you can see, some of the strips appear to stretch all the way across under my photos when they don't really. I've just trimmed them up and hidden the ends underneath of my photos. I've also got my clouds glued down into place, and I'm bringing in some of the little fussy cut clouds from one of the pattern papers and layering those on top. Now eventually I'll switch to some stars that were from that same beautiful navy paper, and I'm going to dot those around my clouds as well. These tiny details add a little bit more shadowing and layering to those clouds just to make them a little bit more interesting, give them a little bit more pop. It also helps to tie in my very beautiful kind of a charcoaly gray title. These puppy titles are part of this collection, and I am using glue because I live in the southern part of the United States. It gets extremely warm and extremely humid down here, and quite often my adhesive just doesn't cut it. So anytime there is an adhesive that has like stickers or from on the alphas, it's not that it's not good adhesive, it's just that where I live, it needs more. We need way more. I have learned my lesson, and even double-sided tape requires me to add just a little bit of glue in addition to the double-sided tape behind my photos, behind my papers, behind all of my layers, which is very fiddly but necessary so that it doesn't dry out and just start falling apart. So, little tip for you if you do live in a very, very humid or heated area. I know Australia is the same way. They get a lot of heat. And yeah, you just got to add some extra adhesive to make sure that stays put. So I'm going to call this one Camper's Life, and I'm going to create a nice little cluster of embellishments with my 6x12 sticker sheet here. Again, we're sticking with the Great Escape collection, and I'm adding some little tabs around my photos, but I'm also going to add some little banners underneath of that title just to give it a little extra detailing, a little extra something fun. And then on the big cloud to the far left, I will come in later with my little T-square ruler to do some journaling, and that's where all of the wordy stuff is going to be up at the top. And then it gives my photos the opportunity to fill in the bottom. And because there's a little bit of separation between the two, it doesn't completely overwhelm the page, but at the same time, you can kind of appreciate each of the two sections separately. Having that blank space at the center in between them kind of gives your brain a little place to rest and make sure that the page doesn't feel too busy. And adding in those big fluffy white clouds also helps to break up that sort of busy tone-on-tone background. Now, these are just little sunshines in the background. I think they're quite cute. I thought that was perfect to put these clouds right on top of the sunshines, as if the sun is just beaming through them. I just love that effect. So now I'm going around adding in a little bit of glue around the outside edges to these little bitty stars, to little clouds, anything that I can to get things stuck down. I didn't used to use glue very often, but I've just come to the conclusion that I can't avoid it anymore. It's just the only adhesive that seems to work even in high temperatures. So now I am adding a few tiny little stars on top of the banner. So adding those little bitty details make a big difference in the overall feel of your layout, just feeling more finished. For me, it doesn't feel finished until I've added all of those tiny little details. And on this one, I bring in a lot of tiny little stars that I've fussy cut from the pattern papers, as well as from the titles, which had some beautiful little puffy stars that I'm going to add around the page as well. So lots of scattering on this one, but I went pretty low-key with the splattering at the end, which kind of offsets how much scattering I did, I think, because I didn't really need to do a lot of splattering, seeing as how we've got a very busy background. It just didn't need it. And most of the time I am using gold ink spray to splatter at the end to fill in some gaps and kind of create more cohesion on the layout by filling in any open areas with just a little bit of something, just a little bit of something fun so it doesn't feel empty. But this layout does not feel empty. It feels pretty well balanced, and that background has that covered. There's really not a lot of empty space to fill in, and so I really like how that turned out. Didn't end up using any of the gold ink spray on this one, just some Nuvo at the end. Now I knew I wanted to add in a few embellishments here at the bottom, but nothing too heavy. I don't want to cover up my photos. These photos are from a camping trip that my husband had taken the kids on back in 2020. So at the height of everyone being locked away, we all just kind of stayed home for such a long time. And when kind of the restrictions were not nearly as bad, where we're kind of lifting in most places, my husband decided to take the kids out to go camping and get them out of the house, because we all been stuck in the house for months and months and months. And he was just like, all right, everybody's getting stir crazy. We gotta get out of here just for a little while. So they went to Cumberland Falls, which at the time did not have very many people there at all. So he was able to avoid people entirely while they were there and just go hiking for a couple of days before they came back home. And I think that was a really necessary thing for everyone's mental health at the time. I think a lot of people went camping as a safe outing that wasn't going to be around people. And that worked out for our family as well. So that's where these pictures are from. And I do have a lot of camping photos. So this is a perfectly timed collection for Zoe to come out with. This lovely Great Escape with its camping theme is perfection, because my family did a lot of camping. They absolutely loved camping, and I have tons and tons of camping photos to do, so I am thrilled to dive into this one. Now down here at the bottom, I am adding a little scene of some mountains and the tent and the little adventure word. And I really wanted to add this at the bottom because it felt like I just had this gap down here at the bottom that just needed something, but I wanted it to be something that was simple and that wasn't going to draw too much attention away from my photos. So I just did one little scene here, nothing that's super eye-catching or pops off the page. So my tent kind of blends in with the background a little bit. The mountains, because they're set behind both the tent and the adventure word, really don't stand out a lot, and if they do, they kind of just point to the photos. And so I'm not drawing too much attention away from the photos, but I am just filling in that gap there at the bottom. I love how this came out. It is such a fun layout, and it's a style that I don't do super often anymore, but the building of little shelves is just such a fun way to scrap. I think it's so interesting what little bits and pieces you can squeeze onto a shelf layout that you might find tricky on other layouts. So in my mind, the thought process with a shelf style layout is that you can have things that are difficult to use otherwise. For example, you might have some that have little animals that you could make them look like stuffed animals if they're on a shelf. You might have little rocket ships. Well, they can look like toy rocket ships if you put them on a shelf. And I think that's just a really fun concept, and it's something that I really enjoy doing. If I have a collection where I'm like, well, how would I use these elements? Well, let's put them on a shelf. Let's turn them into toy versions of themselves or display versions of those icons, and sometimes that makes them a little easier to use. In this case, I really wanted to do clouds at the top. Like, I was just in my head fixated on this concept of the clouds across the top. And so then I had to figure out how I was going to place my photos at the bottom to make that work. How was I going to make that work? And so once I got the clouds onto the page, I was like, oh, I can do a shelf layout. And that is where I just kind of launched from there to getting all of these beautiful photos onto one page. I will have a companion page at some point in the future because there were a lot of photos from this particular trip, and I do have quite a few to scrap. I think I have 6 more to scrap. And so we will have more lovely layouts from this collection, maybe 2 more. Using this gorgeous Great Escape collection. This should be in stores soon, hopefully. We just got it, I think, last week, and so it should be in stores, I'm assuming, in February. And be sure to check out your local online places, or if you are in Australia, they definitely have it in the location of Australia. They have it in person for sure, but I know here in the US we tend to have it online available, so definitely give that a little search and find a shop near you to check it out. Now this is my little T-square ruler. I'm adding in my journaling here in this little cloud. This is a technique that I am really enjoying at the moment, and that is called shaped journaling. And so whether I am using a shape to draw in my journaling and then like that shape is a negative space, or in this case it's a positive space where I've added a cloud and then drawn on top of the cloud. It's still a really fun way to squeeze in some journaling without having to add lines somewhere else on the page, especially with a busier background like this. It would have been a little bit trickier to get journaling on the page. I could have done it, but I thought this was just a little bit more fun. I am going to outline the clouds to make sure that they stand out just a little bit, have a little definition from the page, and I think that adds a nice little detail to them. My little trick though for outlining is inevitably I will mess up my outline. It's gonna happen. I know it's gonna happen, so I kind of plan for it, and I add these little faux stitching lines in any spots where I've messed up, and then I go to, say, the other two clouds and add faux stitching lines just to balance them out, make it look intentional. Because if you make a mistake, you can always cover it up or incorporate it somehow into the design. So never stress too much about making a little mistake, especially with something like outlining, because those faux stitching marks actually add quite a bit more detailing to the page, and I love that. So I've added in those little stars from the titles puffy stickers. I'm going to come in with my Nuvo drops, and then this one will be done. I really enjoyed this one. I think it came out super fun and full of energy, just perfect for these camping photos. That's it for this one, guys. Be sure to check out the blog at cocovanilla.com.au, and until next time, bye y'all.